bless every Barbadian and those who reside in this land. Send your Holy Spirit on our elected leaders. As we think of your holy word, give them the prudence of Solomon and the deliberations. That may all heed your word. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. So may all be done this day for your glory. Amen.
Amen.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord comes upon you and give you his peace. Amen.
This House is now in session.
Announcements by Your Honour.
Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday 9th of July and Tuesday 16th July to be confirmed.
Speaker, I beg to move that those minutes be taken as read.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are confirmed. Message from the Honourable the Senate to the Honourable the House of Assembly. The Honourable the Senate has the honour to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly that at its sitting on Wednesday 7th of July 2019, the Utilities Amendment Bill 2019 was amended in terms as cited below. 1. Clause 1 was amended by inserting the word regulation after the words utility in the clause. And 2, by correcting the reference to the Utilities Act to read Utilities Regulation Act wherever it appears in the bill. And the Honourable the Senate transmits the amended bill to the Honourable the House of Assembly, inviting concurrence in the amendments to the bill, dated the 17th day of July 2019, signed by the President.
Messages for Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers.
Honourable Member St. Michael's Office.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the Constitution, Delegation of Functions, Administrative, General and Professional Service, Teaching Service and Protective Services, Miscellaneous Provisions Order 2019. I'm also commanded to lay the Duties, Taxes and Other Payments Exemption Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. Order 2019, as well as the audited financial statements of the Board of Management of the St. Leonard's Boys School for the financial years ended 31st of March 2009 to 31st of March 2012, and annual reports for the years 2008 to 2012.
Government notices.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Public Service Miscellaneous Provisions Bill of 2019 and the Administrative Justice Amendment Bill 2019. I also give notice of the Barbados Tourism Product Authority Amendment Bill 2019.
Private members' notices. Notices of questions. Reports from select committees. First reading of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Public Service Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2019 be read a first time, as well as the Administrative Justice Amendment Bill 2019.
The question is,
Also, Mr. Speaker, the Barbados Tourism Product Authority Amendment Bill 2019.
the question is that the aforementioned bills be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and obituary speeches. Personal explanations. Motions for leave of absence. Or replies to questions. Notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matter of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are so suspended. Government business is now the order of the day.
Mr. Speaker, order number 5 in the name of the Honourable Leader of the House to move that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee to consider the grants of sums of money for the service of this island.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Committee of Finance.
The question is that the Speaker do leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in the Standing Finance Committee.
Order 5A in the name of the Honourable Minister of Education to move the passing of a resolution to grant a sum of $175,000 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2019-2020 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 1 for 2019-2020, which form the schedule to this resolution. Head 87, Ministry of Education, Technology and Vocational Training, in the sum of $175,000.
Madam Chair, this is a relatively straightforward matter this morning, but it is one that I believe gives the opportunity for some discussion on the state of special needs education and certainly inclusive education in Barbados. Back in 2017, when it was then the Ministry of Education, Science, Technology and Innovation, under the CDB Education Sector Enhancement Program, which was called ESEP2, the minor civil works component would have invited quotations for the construction of a floor slab under phase 1 of the basement classrooms at the Anhill School. This initiative was aimed at providing much needed additional classroom space for the special needs students at that institution. At the time, phase 1 of the basement classrooms were completed back in April of 2017 at a cost of $59,962.20. Phase 2 of this initiative, however, was scheduled for July 2017 to coincide with what is traditionally become known as the domestic summer program. That is the period during which, across Barbados, the opportunity is taken within the Ministry of Education to allow for renovations and refurbishments of school plants, which could not be done during the school term, and certainly which cannot be done during the vacation period at Easter, and certainly at Christmas. However, following a review of the CDB ESEP 2 loan, the CDB recommended the cancellation of the civil works component of that loan, and consequently, this initiative was placed on hold due to a lack of funding. And I know, Madam Chair, that there has been much discussion on this particular project, and under the hands of the last administration, there were a number of schools that would have fallen within this second phase of the project whose works could not be continued or even started. I don't want to repeat what has perhaps been said on several occasions in this chamber, but I think for the purpose of reading it into the record, there was a certain level of inertia on the part of the last administration that led to the CDB taking the position that the termination of this particular component of the loan needed to be put aside. As a consequence, it impacted a number of schools across Barbados which were either in need of complete rebuild or those that were in need of complete refurbishment. And unfortunately, the Ann Hill School, a special needs institution which caters to several students across Barbados, was the casualty, or one of the casualties, of that particular decision. That notwithstanding, this administration certainly considers it a priority area to be able to provide for special needs students. I have the fortune of having the Ann Hill School on the border of my constituency. I have several students from the constituency, but across wider Barbados who attend the institution. And I believe that given the state of play in the country in relation to the demands for special needs places across the plants, the decision has been taken by Cabinet to basically allow us to complete the civil works component of this particular program. Now, the works that are required to be done at the site, which attract the cost of $175,000, includes the construction of external walls, windows and doors, plumbing and electrical and internal finishes. In addition, there's a covered walkway which will be able to provide several of the students and teachers to enter and leave the classrooms during periods of inclement weather. The work is anticipated to take 6 weeks to complete at the cost of $175,000. Now, the funds were provided for in the financial year 2019-2020. However, the allocation at SAC 785, assets under construction, have been directed to carry out major repairs on the main building of the St. Giles Primary School. And again, I know the member for St. Michael East is happy to know that we are directing some funds in that area because there are significant renovations to the roof of the institution, which at this point in time, because of the state of disrepair, I believe it has now become urgent for us to be able to address that particular facility so that we don't compromise the well-being of either our students or even our teachers at that particular institution. Now, the Ministry's total capital requirement for the work at the Ann Hill School and also on the St. Giles Primary School was estimated at $525,000. And given the proposal to utilize the existing $350,000 for the St. Giles primary repairs, the Ministry will therefore need an additional $175,000 to complete the additional classrooms at the Ann Hill School. Fortunate for us, this is really a tidying up in relation to a transfer of funds, and it is really not costing the government any additional funds. And as a consequence, we are requesting a supplementary provision of the $175,000 to complete the additional classrooms under Head 87 of the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Trainings Program 271, Basic Education Development, Subprogram 0277, Primary Education Domestic Program, SAC 751, Property and Plant. I think the major point here, Madam Chair, is that there will be no additional funds. It is really for the purpose of those in the Ministry of Finance, just a transfer and a reallocation of resources. But truth be told, these funds had been budgeted on several occasions and therefore, as a consequence, had not been completed. So, Madam Chair, it is really today, the purpose of today is really to seek Parliament's approval for these funds to be allocated in this particular way, for the provision to be moved from one head to the other. But it also gives us the opportunity to be able to speak to wider issues in relation to special needs. Now, one of the things that I think is particularly important for you all to be aware of is that the 2 classrooms that are now going to be accommodated at this particular institution not only will provide for basic education and training, but in particular, it will provide for additional training in the technical area. This particular school caters to students who we have been, in the last couple of years, pushing more and more in the direction of the technical and vocational, giving them the opportunity to be able to widen the scope of qualifications that will allow them to not only be entrepreneurial, but certainly to be able to sustain themselves. And I believe with the additional classrooms at the site, it will also lend itself for us to be able to have more CVQ programs at the institution. It also allows for the much needed places and the demand for the places that we are seeing and we are witnessing within the Ministry of Education on a daily basis. Now, what is interesting is that right next door is the Irving Wilson plant, and I wish to share with members that the good thing about the 2 institutions is that because of the proximity, it lends itself to a synergy with not only the principals, but certainly with also the level of instruction at that particular institution. And in discussions with both principals, I am pleased that there is a certain level of cooperation and synergizing of activities that can now take place at the 2 institutions. Perhaps in the foreseeable future, we may be able to see the institutions not changing names, but certainly merging even more in terms of shared resources. And I believe that we have to see more of that, particularly in relation to limited financial resources that are available to us. But I think that the will is certainly there by the principals of the 2 institutions to ensure that wherever there can be collaboration of efforts between the 2, that is the position that is taken by both leaders. Now, the other thing, Madam Chair, that I would want to draw to your attention is that there are also other repairs that are being done, which doesn't fall under this particular supplementary, but there are other repairs to guttering that is also being done on the site of the Anhill School. And again, while these are not the full extent of the repairs that are required at the school, it is certainly a lot more than has been done over the course of the past years in relation to the maintenance of this particular plant. It therefore means, Madam Chair, that when the request was made in the last few months for additional funding for the domestic summer program, it was against a background where what I've been seeing on coming to office has been a number of environmental problems that have been plaguing not just the Anhill School, but certainly a number of school plants across Barbados. I often make the joke that I started to feel as though I had become a minister who was responsible for school closures, that if it wasn't bat droppings or pigeons or rat infestation, you know, the cowitch was also an annual problem as well, that these were things that could have been addressed over the course of the past decade, But the priorities of the last administration clearly was not to focus on the maintenance and putting in particular a proper domestic preventative maintenance program for the respective institutions under their portfolio. It isn't to say, ma'am, that monies were not spent, because we can see from the records monies were spent. But I believe that what we have seen transpire is the inability to be able to not just send out carpenters and masons and laborers to be able to do work on an emergency basis, but also we have a situation now where we're having to put that in place because the last administration didn't see it necessary to be able to have a proper maintenance program in place for the school plants. So you have a serious decay of plant and environment across Barbados, which has now impacted on, you know, I tell people it has impacted in such a way that when we look at the budget of education, I don't believe that we are getting the best spend for our money, because the number of days that we are losing in terms of productivity in the school environment is basically counterproductive. We have teachers that are unable to, you know, carry out their duties because oftentimes the environmental factors impact on their health. And that is not to say that we don't have the problems with the students as well, where they are equally impacted by the state of the school plant. It has become such a serious issue, Madam Chair, that the additional funds that have been allocated to the Ministry of Education has allowed us now to capture what is about 41 schools this year in the domestic summer program, which in previous years, certainly even last year on coming to office, they only had about 18 that had been allocated. Now, while some may argue that it is an ambitious feat to be able to try to accomplish this over the summer vacation, I want to make it abundantly clear to the public that I could not preside over the Ministry of Education without starting the process of correcting a number of these deficiencies and these environmental problems. I can't wait 2, 3, 4 years from now to start to make the school plants comfortable for the persons who have to operate in that environment. And therefore, whether it is an issue of environmental problems or whether it is an issue of space, it has become of urgent attention within the Ministry of Education to be able to request the dedication of resources to allow the schools to settle. And I also like to add, ma'am, that, you know, when we want to talk about reforms in education, we can't get to talk about reforms in education unless we allow people to feel comfortable in the place where they have to work and they have to go to school. So while we have increased the numbers and we've had some setbacks in relation to the start of the summer program, I am pleased to say that we have started. Many of the contractors have actually commenced work. The reality is that not all of the projects take 8 weeks. There are some that take 7, there are some that take 6, there are even some that take 3 weeks or 4 weeks. We also have to budget in the course of the summer vacation for things that are unforeseen because we don't know what awaits us in terms of a hurricane season. So with all the best intentions and wanting to be able to accomplish the domestic summer program, the realities are that we find ourselves in a situation where we may be able to complete it on time, but the reality is that there are some external factors that may also impact on our ability to do so. So, Madam Chair, I would like certainly members here, but also wider Barbados, to appreciate from now that there will be some schools that we are going to have to open later, maybe a week later, maybe 2 weeks later. But the reality is that it is either I allow the work to take place in this particular time frame so that there is limited disruption during the actual school term. It is one or the other. The other reality that we've come to face, Madam Chair, is that schools have become year-round institutions. Schools are no longer closed for the vacation. And I know the minister responsible for youth had some concerns this year because the attempt to basically repair the schools has resulted in a situation where there were less summer camps available to his ministry in order to be able to have the number of summer camps before. But I want to say to you that we have to make some sacrifices for the greater good. Because if the school plants become conducive for not just learning during the school term, but then they're in a state where we can now start the necessary repairs to them on an ongoing basis, then I think that it is going to be a win-win for all parties concerned. Is it, Madam Chair, that these funds alone are sufficient, both in relation to Ant Hill or even in relation to the wider domestic summer program, to address the myriad of issues that are facing the schools? I cannot say that it is enough. But what I want members to understand and the country to understand is that we've had to make a start towards turning around what has become an uncomfortable environment for persons to work in. And I give the assurance that we will continue to be able to work with the schools, with the unions, to be able to ensure that we are able to advise and to inform persons if there's going to be delays at other institutions that, you know, the work may have to go on for a longer period. We've also had situations, Madam Chair, where even at the start of school, you have situations where, you know, the industrial cleaning in Ministry of Education became a cash cow over the last couple of years. Because at the opening of the school term, industrial cleaners had to be deployed all across the school plants in order to prepare schools for readiness. Now, in some cases, they went in and cleaned, and then you would find that when you look at the financials, they had to go back in and clean again because either the work was under budgeted or in some cases the work had not been done properly. I want, Madam Chair, to make it abundantly clear that not just in relation to the issue of industrial cleaning, but in relation to our contractors. I had for the first time a meeting last week with the contractors there's over 41 contractors that have been assigned. About 18 new contractors have come into the fold. And I've had the opportunity to meet with them and let them know that this minister will not be accepting poor workmanship during this summer domestic program. We have been fair in our selection because there were several people who would say they couldn't get any work within the Ministry of Education. There are several new contractors that even have been empowered through trust loans and going to take out loans for the first time to be able to set up their businesses that didn't get a look in within the Ministry of Education. And while I am fair in the sense that we must have a new entrants and we must have established persons, equally, Madam Chair, I have let them know that I will not be tolerating the poor workmanship that I have seen in some cases across some of these school plants, because it has been costing the taxpayers money. It has been eating up the resources of the Ministry of Education in a way that has made it difficult for us to be able to spend on the much needed resources that are required within the Ministry of Education. And Madam Chair, I must tell you that, you know, we asked the contractors to work with us to be able, if they had to do extra hours in order to be able to make up for the lost time, they were willing to be able to cooperate with the Ministry of Education, because I think generally people understand and appreciate that this is bigger than any one contract. I've also indicated to them that we will be judging their performance, because prior to my coming to office, there was no assessment of workmanship. You could do work in the ministry, the work was of poor quality, and you would find yourself in a situation, Madam Chair, where you may get back a contract again. Again, I have said that that is unacceptable. This has been costing us significant sums of money over the course of the last decade, and I believe that we have to now act in an even more prudent way to ensure that the other schools that require intervention, that those can also be brought under the domestic summer program in the future. Now, this does not affect our ongoing maintenance of the school plant, because what I have proposed is that, given that we have the schools divided into zones already with building maintenance officers, that we now start an exercise where we take the zones and we start to deploy preventative maintenance programs zone by zone across the schools and across the country. That would allow us to obviously be in a better position, rather, to ensure that if taps need to be changed or if trees need to be cut down so that they don't interfere with the integrity and the structure of wooden buildings, because there are a number of prefab buildings on a number of the sites, that we would be in a position working with the respective ministries, and certainly whether it's contractors or the groundsmen, to be able to ensure that somebody is accountable for these schools, because the last few years, nobody has been accountable for the state of the plants. You have situations where you see school plants and, you know, you go to the facilities, tiles are missing. You have off of walls in children's bathrooms. I have one school, ma'am, that, you know, again, I don't know how I could remain as Minister of Education, and girls' bathrooms had 3 toilets lined next to each other with no division whatsoever. And apparently this practice has gone on for the last couple of years. Now, I could not preside as Minister of Education knowing that young ladies should not be placed in that environment, in a primary school environment. And these are the types of things that have presented us on coming to office. I've seen tiles leading to a toilet. On either side, the tiles are missing. And we all know, those who are involved in health, and you yourself, Madam Chair, would know that that is not a conducive environment for whether it is young men or young women to be able to have to grow up in. These are some of the things that have confronted us on coming to office. And apart from all of the environmental problems that have been plaguing the ministry, the lack of a preventative program to be able to address these problems has basically crippled the Ministry of Education. We have become responsive to urgent cases and urgent works that needed to be done. So whether it is COWICH, where we have to rely on the Ministry of Health, or we have to rely on the Ministry of Agriculture, we have become now responsive to urgent matters, as opposed to knowing, well, COWICH is going to affect Barbados within a specific period. Therefore, we need all hands on deck to be able to address the problem, so that when school term begins, we have been able to address and to find a solution for the issues confronting the schools. Ma'am, I am calling to on my colleagues to ensure that the collaboration that needs to take place takes place in relation to education, because it is going to have a long-term impact on the ability of students to learn and the ability of teachers to teach. I have been fortunate to have the support of the member for St. Michael East, certainly even in relation to the back of the same school, Ann Hill, that we were discussing today. Ann Hill, Irving Wilson, and the Wilkie Cumberbatch School abut and abound a gully. It also abuts and abounds a community, the Princess Royal community. And a few months ago, the member for St. Michael East was requested to be able to clear the entire area to the back of the schools. Now, you have 3 schools in one location, but you are then confronted, Madam Chair, with the issue of rat infestation in the schools. You are confronted with, obviously, issues of mosquito breeding. And then it makes it very unsafe for persons, whether from within the community or even children, being able to traverse one community to the other. So we have to work together as ministers and work more closely together. We also indicated to the member for St. Michael East all of the other schools that were desirous of having some level of intervention, to be able to alert his ministry as well as to some of the challenges that the Ministry of Education is facing, because it is not just the inside of the school plants that require our attention, but it is also the external plant that requires our attention and that impacts on communities. So in the past, a lot of these issues were just allowed to languish in a sense where they were not being addressed, and it has created problems not just for the schools, but it has also created significant problems for the community residents. Now, we can't control things like the monkeys that have taken over schools like Courage and Parry and others in the countryside. But at the same time, what we have to do is to make sure that our premises, for the most part, are secure, to allow them, to stop them rather, from being able to get onto the school premises. And there are steps that we are taking with the resources that we have to address some of those problems, with a view to being able to allow the schools certainly to be able to settle down. Now, I want to touch, Madam Chair, on some initiatives that have been started in relation to special needs in the last year, one of which is that in light of the number of places that have been available, the limited number of places that have been available, I have been able to secure the assistance of the Derek Smith School, which provides similar services to the Ann Hill School. And in 2018, 2019, we were able to place, I believe it was about 25 students in that institution to be able to continue their education and their training in that facility. And I would want to publicly thank them in this forum for the assistance thus far given. This year, I believe there are another 11 places that have been allocated to the Ministry of Education. We have provided the funding for one additional teacher in the institution because we see it as a partnership with the school. And for those who have visited the school, I am sure would want any child to be able to go to an environment which is so well maintained, but certainly where the curriculum and stuff is so varied to allow us to be able to get the best in terms of potential out of our students. That, Madam Chair, must continue so long as the Derek Smith School and the board is willing to assist the Ministry of Education to help us to build out the places, because I think if we take the position that every child matters, then no one can have any qualms about being able to partner in that way with private entities that are willing to be able to place children across the spectrum who have a range of learning challenges or physical disabilities. I think we would all agree that it was an urgent situation. The backup was just ridiculous when I came to office. And I believe that more initiatives like that are needed, and those are the things that I'm seeking out, where we are unable at this point to build out institutions, but we have a deficit in terms of our ability to provide for the very students that we are responsible for, then we have to partner with those who have the greater resources to be able to assist us. Because the demands are greater. We're seeing a number of children, even within the mainstream school system, also having challenges as well. You know, I know that the member for St. Thomas, when she joins this debate, will take us back to where we were several years ago when she was in the Ministry of Education, on a journey where the issue of testing of students, whether it was for hearing, whether it was for sight, was an important part of a previous Barbados Labour Party administration. It was an important part, Madam Chair, because we understood that in order to do the appropriate interventions for children, it was important to understand and to test, do the diagnostic testing to understand exactly what was happening with a child at a particular time. If you don't know, you cannot help. And I know over the last couple of years, in particular the last decade, the issue of testing has been on the back burner because the last administration did not seem to fully appreciate how important the issue of diagnostic testing was, but also that when you test the children, you have to know what you're going to do with them after you test them. So instead of taking the resources to build out what exists and to partner with people who could basically support the needs of the Ministry of Education, they chose to spend money in other directions. As a consequence, we have now been left with a situation where we are trying to keep up with the demands. You know, there was a time when people felt that, you know, children who learn differently should be cast aside, something wrong with the child. And we've come as a society, I hope, to understand and appreciate more and more that children across the spectrum learn differently. And we have to be able to tailor our educational system to be able to capture the imagination of children generally. No child should be cast aside because it is dyslexic. No child should be cast aside because it may have any difficulty or any learning challenge, Madam Chair. The ability of an educational system to be able to engage children at all levels and in all ways, using the appropriate technology and ensuring that we are training our teachers is a large part of how we as a society will be able to develop and to be able to sustain ourselves moving forward. Coming to office, ma'am, I also encountered a situation where things like the special needs policy had been in draft for decades. In some cases, under the previous Barbados Labour Party administration and under the leadership of the Prime Minister of Barbados when she was Minister of Education, a policy framework had been put in place. But yet again, elements were picked out of it, pulled out of it, some discarded, without a cohesive and comprehensive approach to dealing with the issue of special needs education and inclusive education. Now, I have, since on coming to office, tried to ensure that we have a committee that has been established to be able to know within the next couple months to be able to have a document that can be taken to cabinet and certainly laid in this chamber as a document that will guide us in relation to inclusive education across the educational system in Barbados. Ma'am, I believe that this is critical that we've reached that juncture now where we have a responsibility to stop having draft after draft. I believe there were about 6 drafts of the document. Different committees set up, but nothing, no framework from which persons could work and understand that we are working together towards a common good. And it is unfortunate that we have found ourselves in that position, ma'am, but I believe that every child matters in relation to how we must move forward. We have seen the emergence of a number of special units across schools. Again, one of the biggest challenges we are seeing is that a number of the children have not been tested. The diagnostic testing has not been done. Parents know something wrong with the child. The teachers know something is wrong. But unless you have that intervention which allows you to diagnose the child, it almost becomes pointless because you are actually placing us in a situation where you cannot get the intervention for the very children that you're trying to serve, ma'am. And the emergence of these special units, again, without a proper, perhaps a collection of data to be able to guide us in terms of what is transpiring across the country, special units have popped up based on where the space is available, in many cases, at institutions. I have asked for the data to be collected not just on where the challenges are being faced across the country, because for the most part, you can find children with some issue in terms of on the special needs spectrum somewhere across Barbados. It therefore means, ma'am, that the approach can no longer be this ad hoc way in which we deal with special needs education and learning difficulties. It has to be an approach where we try to ensure that teachers in particular are trained in special needs education as the norm and not as the exception. Because that is what now society, Barbadian society, now dictates. That you have to be able, if you have students who are learning differently, that you have to be able to have no differentiated instruction. So what does it mean? The teacher has to be trained in that area, or at least have the introduction to be able to understand and to identify what the problems are with the particular child, and to be able to make the referral to have those issues addressed, ma'am. Fortunately, ma'am, you know, we are at a point where we have collected or started to collect the data in relation to persons who were trained in the system in special needs education, because a lot of money was spent previously training teachers. But then the deployment of teachers across the system was not done in any systematic way. So you have teachers who are not sometimes, who are trained in special needs education, but not teaching anything related to special needs. And there are institutions which require persons with the background that don't have them, ma'am. So it is now going to require, and I think that we have to let the public understand what we have found, but give the assurance as well that we are seeking to address it in a systematic way. And I want people to appreciate that it is not going to be an overnight process. Because what we have found is long entrenched in the last decade in terms of people have settled in environments, but we're going to have to shift persons in order to be able to get the best fit across institutions to give the support in terms of learning, okay, in that particular environment. We've also embarked, ma'am, on an exercise with the Maria Holder Trust, which will start, I believe, in September for special needs training. I believe it's over 500 teachers we are starting with across the system. Again, to ensure that this becomes the norm and not the exception in relation to education. And we are moving in the direction, I will take the opportunity to mention it here as well, professional development training. Those of you who are lawyers and doctors in this room, accountants, know that we come from a background where you have to keep up with the times. You have to make sure that you equip yourself with the tools. And in some cases, part of keeping your practicing certificate also requires that you continue to do additional education hours. That is the direction the teaching profession must now move to, ma'am. And we have started that process to be able to take us there. in order to be able to ensure that we get the best out of our teachers, but also that children get the best out of education in relation to their time at school. We have also, ma'am, looked at the allocations for the special units, because I believe that where there are special units, again, allocations have been made to allow for materials and for instruction. But we now have to, I believe, step back to be able to move forward, because it is clear that the demands are so great across the system that it can no longer be business as usual. And I've asked for that review to be done in order for us to be able to assess properly how we move forward in relation to that area. The issue of teaching assistants as well, ma'am, has also become a burning issue in relation to these units as well, because we need to increase the number of teaching assistants within these schools. In a lot of cases, for particular students who are suffering somewhere on the spectrum, many of them require smaller classes. They require the support in the classes of a teacher who can assist the main teacher in the classroom. And again, we have to move in that direction where we are training persons to be able to work in that particular environment. In many cases, ma'am, it has become some volunteers from teachers who have assisted in the classroom, but we now have to move where those persons have children who may have the challenge and they're helping out the school. We now have to look towards being able to train them appropriately, to equip them with the tools that are necessary to assist within the school plan. I see you nodding at me, ma'am, so I will take my seat and I will come back in shortly.
Thank you.
I beg to move, ma'am, that the resolution do now stand part. Head 87, yeah, stand part.
Okay. Honourable Member for West Central.
Madam Chair, I want to thank the Minister for bringing this supplementary, this much-needed supplementary, $175,000 for the Ant Hill development and physical development for the school. Madam Chair, we as a government on the 25th of May 2018 made an unreserved, and my good friend, the Member of Parliament for Christchurch East, would tell me an undiluted, the Member of Parliament for Water Resources, an undiluted commitment to the people of this country, certainly, and to the vulnerable community, the young, the elderly, and the differently able community. And I want to say that some people may not like to use the word special needs. They may call it own needs, alternative needs, but at the end of the day, persons with challenges. And I want to thank certainly the Member of Parliament and the Minister responsible for education for bringing this resolution, because we must not only have a physical presence in terms of building out our schools, but we must build out our schools in a literal way, and especially our Chinese schools. And it reminds me, Madam Chair, of the words of none other than the mighty Sparrow, when he says, education, education, this is the foundation. Our rising population needs sound education. To be recognized anywhere you go, you have to have the certificate to show. I am saying, Madam Chair, to this House and to Barbados, all in earshot and eyeshot, that one of the things that will define us as a country is our educational system and the ability to educate every single person in this country, irrespective of their challenges, their financial position, their religious position, irrespective of their cultural norms. Education must be able to extend itself across the length and breadth of Barbados. And I'm saying that we must not only develop buildings, develop edifice, structures to put our children in, we must develop institutions of learning which look at the needs of every single child. And I'm saying that many times, Madam Chair, is that when you put it in context in terms of the special needs child, a lot of times those children go unnoticed. And you often hear teachers complain about a hard-eared child, or a child who's restless in the classroom, a child who don't care nothing about studying, who's not interested in his books, who has no interest in learning. But the reality is that those children may have special challenges. And you as a medical doctor will understand what I'm speaking of. They may have cognitive impairments, medical idiosyncrasies. They may have social and special problems at home that may not be recognized in the classroom. And I hear the minister spoke pretty lucidly about the fact that special needs training must become part and parcel of this whole exercise of education. And she also said that over the last lame and limp decade, that money was put towards a special needs program, but little was done. The execution of it was never carried out, and so our special needs teachers were never put in positions so that their training could be fully utilized. I am saying today that every single teacher in this country, every single teacher should participate in a training exercise where they can be qualified in special needs education. And until we get serious about this, because at the end of the day, the next 10, 15 years, when history reflects itself, I know that you had a August gentleman here who said that history is when something is done for the first time. But when history is reflected upon and is visited upon, we as a government of the day must pass that moral test, which speaks to the way how we treat those that have challenges, and as I say, are differently able. And we see the ability of these children across the world in terms of what they can do with technology. We have a disabled youngster in America who specializes in quantum physics. You would have never heard about that before. Look what happened in the Society for the Blind in terms of the chair, caning of the chairs and the mock building and the construction of all types of things down there. It's fascinating how they're using computers. And I'm saying that we have to train those persons who are differently able and give them every single opportunity so that they can rise above their expectation. And as the minister said, it must not longer be referred to as the exception. It must be the norm. It must be the way of life in Barbados. And those in the disabled community, especially those young people who have challenges, I am saying that they will have this mouthpiece as the Minister of Youth. And certainly I will raise my red flag in support. And equally, I will raise it in defense of those persons who are differently able, because I'm saying to them that they have a tangible stake and a democratic state in this country. And we will do every single thing as a government to ensure that they have a space so that they can be safe and productive. So the $175,000 is not only going to redefine a structure in a building, and I implore the minister to look at the structures, not only the physical structures, but I want to look at the aesthetics of these places. Oftentimes you go around communities and you look at schools, and sometimes I wonder if these are actual places that children go to be involved in any learning exercise. I see buildings that are derelict. that the paint is not attractive. And even in medicine, and you as a doctor would know, all the colors of antidepressants are bright, are vibrant. They are attractive. I am saying that it's time in Barbados that we have attractive, bright buildings for our children that would attract them to the institution, would encourage them to go to the institution because it's a learning institution. They spend most of their waking time, the waking moments of their day at schools. So it must be a place that empowers them in a special way to be there when the days come. And I am saying that the colors that we use must attract our children, whether it's the differently able children or those that go to normal schools. We must brighten up those children's life, because it is not only the generation that we are seeking to protect, the generation before us, but we have a threat, as I speak, on the unborn child. That ovum and the egg that you know so well, Madam Chair. And if we don't protect the unborn child, and if we don't put measures in place as it relates to education, we don't have gold and bauxite and all the other resources like other countries, oil. What we have is our people. And we have to imbue our people with a sense of entitlement. And those especially in the challenged areas. And we must have a learning atmosphere where all of those persons are given equal opportunities. And I am saying to the minister to continue. Look for those teachers in the system who are trained and make sure there is a teacher. If you can have it at every single a teacher or two, you can work out the ratio. Because there's an international ratio as it relates to teachers per students. And those that are trained in special needs. I am saying this is serious because sometimes it really doesn't hit home until it affects your family, your immediate family. But my best friend, and everybody knows in their shop, is blind. And I see the amazing things that he does in terms of caning chairs and the way how he interacts with society. I am saying that we have to start with our children. And irrespective of whatever problems they have, we have to have that listening ear and that sensitivity, because we have a duty as a country to protect our children. And I am saying to communities, because I'm not only Minister of Youth, but I have responsibility for the communities. The communities have to start taking care of their schools. There must be respect between communities. There must be, since we talk about medicine, there must be a symbiosis, man. The way how the schools and the community interact. In the same way that the schools provide education for your children, I am saying to the communities, you must participate in the growth and the protection of the schools in your environment. So we must not wait until the minister seeks funding for cleanup exercise around the schools and painting of the schools. The community must put out their hand and be counted for and be part of the society in terms of protecting and growing our children. And so I'm saying to community and community organizations, today I'm calling for a level of altruism in Barbados, a level of activism and volunteerism. There must be a new buzzword as how we take care of our children and our communities and the schools in the communities. And equally, I'm saying to the headmistresses and the headmasters of the schools that you must reach out to communities, because the communities are the eagle eye as it relates to ensuring that the schools are protected when there's no one around. And if you have a good, strong, vibrant community working in a school environment, you hardly find the vandalism that takes place on a regular basis, because it costs the taxpayers. And I see the Member of Parliament for Christchurch East, and it is very difficult for the, I don't know, to say you can get common sense, you can get maybe all types of sense, except the sense that matters in terms of financial sense. from the member of parliament. It's not easy. He understands the reason why we must govern with even keel. And we must have value for every single cent that is spent in this country. So when communities vandalize schools, when there's a lack of respect for the institutions, the very institutions that we have to be held accountable for, it costs the taxpayers. And I'm saying that communities have to come and work. And the same way I am calling on the communities, I am making a clarion call for the headmasters and headmistresses, as you said, to open their eyes. Oftentimes there are schools and communities that just really and truly do not involve the community into activities that they do, whether it's repairs of the schools, whether it is the speech days, and I'm saying to the headmasters and headmistresses, when you have this speech day and the events going on at school, reach out to the member of parliament in the area.
Honourable member, you have 2 minutes.
Ask them to become, no problem, Madam Chair, ask them to become involved, because we may not have a lot of money, but I'm sure that we will find ways and means to be part of the development of that school. That is what we are here for. Involve us. And I'm saying that a school must not only be recognized as a building. And when you're building out our young people, we can't only build them out literally, but we must build them out figuratively as well, because our young people, the future of this country, is the most important cog in the survival and development of Barbados. And if we don't get it right now, in terms of how we treat holistically to every single child in this country, then we have lost a generation. And in the words of the guys and the promoters of badness, you will now start to produce a Barbados. And we are not going to allow that. So we are saying that communities must be involved. We are asking communities to come on board with the efforts of helping to rescue this country, help to rescue our children. We are asking parents. I don't even know if the Anhill have a vibrant Parents-Teachers Association, but parents should be involved in every single decision and every single step of the journey of their children. The school, these churches, the parents, all these individuals and groups must work together to save and rescue our children. And I implore the member of parliament, certainly and the minister for the education, to continue to educate our children, because to have a sound education, to be recognized anywhere in this world, you must have the certification to show. And Barbados is proud of the people that we have produced, and all over the world. And we are telling persons, the young people, to look beyond that horizon, that line that separates sea and sky. Look beyond that, because there's a future out there for you. And the education allows that future to be realized and allow you to become the global citizens that you can be. So I'm saying I'm calling on all Barbadians to protect the schools, protect the institution, allow our young people to have a voice and to use their creative imagination to be the best, whether they are differently able or not, to be the best that they can be. Madam Chair, I am obliged. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for an opportunity to make a short intervention into this debate. You must forgive me because this is a little emotional for me, and I'll explain why when I get in a little bit more into my presentation. First, I want to support the $175,000 that is being put into adding two, I believe it's two, it doesn't say, it could be three, 2 new classrooms to the Hill School. And the reason why it is very emotional for me, Madam Chair, is because I have a short story to give to this Honourable Chamber. It's something that I've never really spoken about in this chamber before. The member for St. James Central would be aware of it because I spoke of it on a political platform, and he happened to be the one to speak after me. So he heard some things about it. And I think the member for St. Peter was there as well, if memory doesn't escape me. But the reason I want to talk about it, because adding classrooms to school reminded me of something that I did when I was a very new member of Parliament. And the only school that we have in Christchurch West is now called Arthur Smith. It used to be called the St. Matthias School. And the St. Matthias School is the school that my father went to. It was the only school that he went to. He didn't get an opportunity to go to secondary school, like all of us in here. He didn't get a chance to be able to improve his education and to achieve so much through that enhanced education. But he made the best out of the primary school education he had. Because at that time, primary school education was all that many people had to live by. And Madam Chair, it makes me wonder, what could my father have achieved if he had had the benefit of a better primary school education to then be able to go on to secondary school education and then go on to university and post-university and post-university, like how I was able to do? You know, my mother would tell me that I went all the way. And I went all the way through the benefit of education. And no cent is badly spent when it is spent on education. And the education of our people is how our people have been able to improve this country, to come from slavery, to be able to now be the Prime Minister and the members of Parliament and the Cabinet and run this country. It's all through the benefits of education. And I will always support 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million, whatever it is, because education is the way for our future, the future of this country, the future of our people, and the way that we must continue. And I understand why the school plant has been run down, because the last administration didn't get it. They went up the ladder and then kicked down the ladder. And then didn't put any money in maintaining the school plant. Didn't put money into education as was required. And that's why we now find ourselves having to maintain the school plant like what we have to do. And we are going to do it. We put back tertiary education for the people of this country after they stopped it, and we're going to fix the school plant, and we're going to make education better, and we're going to make Barbadians proud of the education that they get here in this country. I want to share a story with you, Madam Chair. When I was a young MP, the then principal of St. Matthias, now Arthur Smith, approached me and showed me a hall and told me that they had hundreds of people, hundreds of young children on the roll, and they had no place to put them. And her view was that if we enclosed the hall at St. Matthias, we could get 3 or 4 new classrooms. And this hall was used, yes, it was used to do morning prayers. And we in Christchurch West used to use it once a year. We used to have an annual Christmas luncheon, and we would have our event in this hall and so on. But apart from the morning prayers and the Christmas luncheon, it was really not used. It was an open area that was not really used. And I agreed with the principal. We approached the Ministry of Education, and they gave us permission to enclose the hall. In my wisdom, at the time I guess, I raised the funds, went out to corporate Barbados, and they sold us the materials at cost price, and we were able to enclose that hall at Arthur Smith. That gave the Arthur Smith School, I think, 3-4 classrooms. And I was proud of it. Never spoke about it. Never used it to win an election or anything like that, because my predecessor, Henry Ford, please forgive me for using his name, the former member for Christchurch West, the former, now Sir Henry Ford, he always impressed on me that when you give somebody something, there's nothing to be publicized. Not like previous people that I saw used to give people 2 boxes of Kentucky and call the press. Madness. So I never really publicized it. I never spoke about it. Because I did it for 2 reasons. I did it to improve the lives of the people, not only in Christchurch West, because not only people from Christchurch West go to Arthur Smith, people from all over Barbados go to Arthur Smith. But I did it for the memory of my late father. I think that was important for me, because it was the only school that he'd been to, and it was important to be able to give back something to the community. And you know, that's why I am in this chamber, madam, because I was fortunate enough to receive a Barbados government exhibition in 1986, and at that time that was $250,000. The government of Barbados and the people of Barbados invested that in me. And it is because of that that I said I had a duty and a responsibility to give back to those that had given to me. Because if it was not for their hard work, if it was not for their tax dollars, I couldn't have achieved anything either. I joke and tell my wife that I'd probably be just a truck driver. Not that a truck driver is a bad job, but I don't think I would have achieved anything more than what my abilities would have given. So education is important. And to get back to the story, I enclosed the hall, and we got 4 classrooms. We raised the money in the community. I raised what I could, got help from corporate Barbados, and we did the same thing. Added on 4 classrooms. But you know what happened then? My colleagues are trying to distract me. But you know what happened then? The sad thing about it is, we got 4 classrooms, but we lost a hall. And I always saw it as unfinished business, that I did not give back to Arthur Smith that hall that they had lost. And it was important, because morning prayers then had to be held essentially in the car park at Arthur Smith. And I felt bad about that. So, when I was fortunate enough and the people reposed their confidence in me to return to this Honourable House in May of last year, I set about with the intention to fix the unfinished business and to give back to that school a hall. And let me report that we've actually done the foundation work. Didn't ask the ministry for anything. We did it. And on top of that, we did 2 bathrooms as well, and renovated them at the school. But now all we need to do is the roof. And we've asked the Ministry of Education to approve the final plans for the roof. And Madam Minister, if you could please expedite that, because now is the time that I would have loved to be doing the roof. But because I can't get the permission for the Ministry of Education, I can't do the roof to be able to complete the unfinished business that I have to do. I'm not going to tell you how much the roof costs, and we're not coming for a supplementary. I can do the roof. But all we need is the permission. And it goes to the model that the member for Christchurch West Central was talking about. Communities can come together and help in schools. The communities and the schools need to look to the members of Parliament. Because, as he said, we might not have a lot of money, but we know how to raise money, we know how to get other people involved, we know how to bring people together, set up a project, and work together to get things done. Because how many times have we heard, many hands make light work? And that's what we need to do. We need to get that community spirit back. We need to improve our communities, so that people that follow us in this honourable chamber, and I'm not looking at any particular person in mind, but there are young people in this chamber who want to be members of Parliament, who want to emulate the good work that we have done. And we need to set good examples for them. And we need to show them the way and the right way to get things done. So that when they come to this honourable house, and they will, in Christchurch West too, possibly. When they come to this honourable chamber, they will have a strong foundation to stand on. And stand on our shoulders, because we got here standing on other people's shoulders too. You didn't get here on your own. None of us did. It is good teachers. It is good parents. It is a good educational system that brought us here. And that is what we have to build on, and that is the legacy we have to leave for those that follow us.
Honourable Member, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So, I look forward to completing the work that I started. I look forward to the assistance, not only from the ministry, but from corporate Barbados. And let's be straight and honest. This government just reduced corporation tax to 5%. It is now your chance to give back to the community and to this country that has given so much to you. Have a sense of duty, have a sense of honor, have a sense of responsibility to do your part in the development of this country. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for the City.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to give support to this supplementary resolution to grant the sum of $175,000 to the Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Training for the execution of a construction project at the Ant Hill School. And I do so recognizing that we as a government, and certainly as a people, need to do more and continue to do so in order to facilitate the training of our young people who require a special needs training environment. The Ant Hill School, I believe, has done well, very well, over the years. And I'm advised, for example, that Mackie Tone of When Troy Walk Out film, a singer, and also Redman, actor, known to a lot of people on social media, they are products of Ant Hill. And that says something to me. That says to me that if we provide the right kind of environment, that a lot of people who may fall through the cracks otherwise can still make a significant contribution to this country. And so I give this my fullest support. But I also believe that the time is approaching when we as a government need to look at the whole concept of special needs education. What do we call special needs? And I think that we need to even expand that concept, and to do so at a rapid pace. I believe, for example, that those persons who are in our secondary schools, mainstream secondary schools, where academic training is preeminent. I believe that persons, for example, who are pursuing or who are studying industrial arts, metal, woodwork, that the time has come for us to create special institutions for such persons, institutions where their skills and the kind of things that they want to pursue assume prominence rather than keeping them within the mainstream system where they may be considered as perhaps second-class students, considered concept. And in so doing, I believe it will do something to the level of self-esteem of those persons that I'm talking to or talking about. And I feel that that is a direction that we need to move in so that sometime in the near future, we may see a school or a facility that facilitates training in technology, I'm speaking at the secondary level, in computer technology, for example, in music, in dancing and culture, so that we provide the avenue for those persons to be able to reach the very top throughout their development as young people and into adulthood. But I also have another reason for speaking this morning. The Ministry of Health and Wellness, which I have the honor to lead, is responsible for the Albert C. Graham Children's Development Center. And that's a very important responsibility in my view. And it is a kind of a hybrid situation in which that institution provides certain medical and paramedical services to children who have disabilities. Children who have disabilities but have several abilities or the ability to do several things. And for them, they depend on us to be able to provide the platform, the environment, and the avenue so that they can reach their true potential in spite of the challenges that confront them. But that center has an educational component. There's an educational unit which is governed by the curriculum of the Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Training. The unit has 2 classrooms for children with multiple challenges. I believe there are about 2 to 3 teachers who look after these 2 classrooms. The last graduation, between 15, and I think it was 15 or 20 of them that graduated. But we need to pull that educational unit into the Ministry of Education in terms of the provision of supplies and services and support for the teachers who are teaching within that particular environment. And to be honest with you, there's a requirement for additional facilities to be able to provide assistance to several more Barbadian children who have these challenges that I mentioned just now. But I also want to say that the provision of the classroom space or spaces, or even sometimes the retrofitting of an existing structure alone is not what is required, especially when we are speaking to children who have multiple disabilities. And I believe that one of the areas that we need to start to pay some attention to is perhaps in maintenance within the Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Training, Ministry of Public Works, in relation to providing facilities that are oriented towards people with challenges, with disabilities. We need to provide, for example, classrooms that have accessibility for wheelchairs, accessibility and maneuverability. We need to provide computer-assisted accessibility learning for developmental education. Even the very furniture that we provide need to be able to accommodate special devices as we advance in this rapidly technological era. And all of these things would give these children the ability and provide the teachers with the capacity to be able to allow these children to develop in the way that we would want them to develop. We also have to look at how we allocate teachers or assign teachers to deal with children who require special needs training or children with disabilities who also require special needs training. When we look, for example, at ratios, the number of teachers to students within that kind of an environment, it is not the same as the general environment because there's a lot more of a requirement for supervision, for one-on-one encounters and so forth. And to be honest with you, I spent some time with the teachers at the Albert C. Graham Children's Development Center. And it was a time really worth spending. And I say so because, yes, it was humbling. The amount of work that is required and the passion and the desire of those teachers to provide for these children, even at their own expense, really touched me. And I said to myself that whenever I had the opportunity, and I had mentioned, I had a discussion some time ago with the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast, I said that I will bring this to the fore, because even equipment that is required for these classrooms, that is an area that we are lacking in. And I want to go a step further. I congratulate charitable organizations like Maria Holder Charity, the Sandelian Trust, and all others who have been doing a wonderful service for the people of Barbados. I really do salute them. But I think as a people that we need to go beyond that. I don't think that we should sit back, and I'm not speaking now as a member of parliament or even as a minister of cabinet. I'm speaking of a Barbadian. As a Barbadian, a person who was born and bred here, a person who interacts with all of these persons that we are trying to provide services for. We too, as a people, must have a spirit of trying to take care and having the desire and the passion that those teachers at Albert C. Graham have, to be able to take care of all of our citizens, whether young or old, who have challenges, disabilities, and who count on us to provide that sort of care. And I believe, Madam Deputy Chair, that even though the government of Barbados has the responsibility to provide for these institutions and for these persons, I believe that we as a nation must come to the realization that whether it is through in-kind assistance or financial or material assistance, that we can do a lot to provide equipment and all of the facilities that are required for these people to be able to live out their lives. And that goes even to our elderly care facilities, geriatric hospital. We have to look after our people in a much better way and not just sit back and depend on others to provide for us. And that is a call that I'm making to all of us who are Barbadian, and all of us indeed who live on this rock, whether Barbadian or not, to join in that effort to assist the government of the day, whichever government that is, in continuing to provide high-class services and facilities for all persons who are challenged or with disabilities of any kind. And so, I say that the $175,000 is money well spent, and that we must continue to find ways to be able to expand the services, whether health or education, to everyone in our community. And I draw strength from the desire, for example, in the Ministry of Health, to provide at access to health care to all persons who are living in this country. I draw strength from the HIV/AIDS program to treat all, irrespective of where they come from, as long as they're here. And I draw strength from that military value tradition of not leaving anyone behind. And so we as a nation must do everything to ensure that when it comes to education, when it comes to health care, that we do not leave any of our citizens behind. I am obliged.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say how happy I am to have learned of this sum of $175,000 to be spent to upgrade the Ant Hill School, which is a school, as we all have learned, is facilitating the needs of the differently able in our society. We know that they deserve treatment. Sometimes people call it special treatment. And I believe that that special treatment should be meted out to them in the same way that ordinary, what we call normal people, receive, because they have got challenges that must be met and that they can make a contribution to the growth and development of this society. The theme of the Ministry of Education in the curriculum reform time of 1996, which was a profound aspect of the growth and development, and indeed the existence of the Ministry of Education in this country, was each one matters, quality education for all. I believe, Madam Chairperson, that the sensitization of Barbadian families over the last half-century have made a tremendous difference in people acknowledging and respecting and embracing persons with challenges, persons who are differently able, and as a result of that, the numbers have grown tremendously over those many years. And of course, they are human beings who deserve better treatment, better in the sense because they've had challenges. They cannot always button up their clothing, tidy up themselves, speak as well as we would like, and so on. But they are human beings who deserve the highest quality of care and attention as anybody else in the world. So the sensitization has helped us to make some leaps and bounds. And I am happy that our schools have opened up to be able to attend to the needs, because many more of our children have been enlisted. They used to be hidden away at home. Families felt, well, it is something wrong with me. The devil has taken over, given me this child, whatever. Barbadians have risen above that, and many other millions of people in the world. But we must treat to our own in that special way to ensure that they fit into this society and that they serve at whichever level they can. Madam Chairperson, more needs to be done, however. We need more resources, whether it be monetary, physical plant, space, playing fields, musical instruments, manipulative apparatus to be able to help them, especially with the technology. And we know that the technology has been changing probably every 2 or 3 years, but those persons who are differently able require that kind of understanding because they can use different parts of their bodies to manipulate those instruments that help to spark the imagination and the knowledge. I believe that mainstreaming is critical, and the Honourable Member Minister would have spoken about the extensions to some of our primary schools to facilitate the needs of those students who were not doing well or not acquiring the necessary knowledge and skills because of the classroom, the regular classroom settings in which they were placed because they perhaps were late developers and they needed some different kind of training. And I believe that the mainstreaming has been able to help us to understand that it is not only the brain, but some of those persons, or the disability, but some of those children are so sharp, verbally and intellectually. It is just that they may be in a wheelchair, or they may not have had the exposure, and therefore they need that kind of assistance. As we have seen what has happened with now our former senator and the president of the other place, ma'am. For 10 years, a woman with a disability that has made profound strides in Barbados at one of the highest levels in this society. And I want to highly commend her and others who continue to do what they have to do. I know, ma'am, that the Common Mayor School was retrofitted to facilitate her needs and the needs of others. And many other schools had their washroom facilities and the ramps and the walkways and sort of schools retrofitted to facilitate those who were differently able, to accommodate the wheelchairs and so on and so forth. I want also to say, ma'am, that Barbados needs also to look at the engagement of our non-governmental organizations. I had the wonderful privilege of meeting with about 10 of them on Friday, and the work they are doing is phenomenal, and many of them have been using the funding. One lady said, I took what I received for my gratuity and plowed it into my little private institution to help to empower those individuals with disabilities. Another one said, I work at Challenger School, and we try our best to raise the funds because, thank God, an agency came on board to fix the roof of Challenger School that had caved in and had caused many of those students who were differently able to have to be away from the training components that were being offered to them. And therefore, I want to encourage more of our NGOs to be recognized and to come on board because we need the synergies. And I want to publicly express my gratitude not only to those who were identified last week, but any other non-governmental or governmental agency or private agency that is serving the persons in this society who are differently able, to bring them on a level where they can become employable, I should say, and independent in whatever is happening. I also want, ma'am, to say that their contribution to society is profound, in promoting and empowering the differently able. Kudos to all of them and any other groups that want to come on board, because we cannot achieve our goals unless our communities come together and we have the synergies working, but the Ministry of Education helping to coordinate with the curricula and the equipment and whatever could be available to make whatever they're doing as impactful as I believe it can. Ma'am, the curriculum of 1996 laid the foundation for those students to get a chance to go forward. And what I found extremely disconcerting is that program for those teachers on an annual basis to be receiving the Mount St. Vincent University training for special needs. And the special needs, ma'am, would not only refer to persons with challenges in the way that we look at our differently able, but indeed the gifted. And many of us have children in our communities and our households who are extremely gifted, but the general way that lessons and so are presented to them, it turns them off. And that was the reason why the curriculum reform determined if these children at 9 plus 10 years old are ready to write this common entrance exam, that they would have been told you have to write it at 11 and otherwise, and stop our children who are very gifted from going to write that exam at that time and spend an extra year in Class 4, and they became very disillusioned, some fell back and so on. That curriculum reform gave them the opportunity to go forward, and every year we have early sitters, so that at 16 years they're ready to do their CXCs fully and start to do the CAPE exam in 6th form. And I think that was a profound step forward. So the Mount St. Vincent University training for that master's degree made the difference. But you know what, ma'am? Where are they now when the Honourable Minister made that query? Many of them have become principals. Millions of dollars have gone down the drain. Many of them are teaching at a different level, and I am so proud that the Honourable Prime Minister in her budget speech spoke about special grade teachers. Because if those teachers had remained in the system, it would have helped to eliminate some of the challenges that we are seeing now, where children are later developers and they are held back in classrooms and nobody is really looking after them because a regular, really trained teacher may not have the skills, and therefore it can be frustrating. It can be confusing for them to want to treat a child when they don't have the know-how. And therefore I call on those persons responsible for the Earlston Teachers Training College not only to provide more training for persons wanting to work with persons that are challenged, but also for opening up to the community that regular persons, including parents and guardians, can get the necessary training that they can do things with them at home and in the communities. I also want, ma'am, to say that these master's trainers will make a difference because they will get salaries commensurate with year heads and all that, but they remain in the primary school or they remain in the secondary school, teaching every day, interacting with these children and helping to transfer knowledge and skill. It is very critical, ma'am, at this time. They can practice their craft but be properly compensated, because teaching today does not seem to be a vocation anymore. It seems to be, I am going there by some to receive this salary, and whether you learn or not, I will be paid at the end of the month. That mentality has to go through the window. If we are here to touch lives and turn them around, all of our teachers, all of our parents, all of those interfacing and interacting with children and others must have that mentality. I am here to serve, and I'm going to give of my best with God's help. We're not seeing that filtering throughout the entire society in the way that I had grown accustomed, having been in there for more than 25 years. I am seeing a totally different approach, absenteeism, disrespect, all kinds of things happening. And it should not be tolerated, and it will not be tolerated under this Honourable Minister. Teaching must be a vocation and not just a job. Similarly, I believe that we need, as we offer the training to teachers and others, we also must ensure there are adequate numbers of psychologists, guidance counselors, social workers, caregivers, parents and guardians receiving that training as well, so when the children leave the school, the parents and others will be able to practice the skills at home. In similar way to what we now call the parent volunteer program, where parents are in the primary schools and they are interacting with teachers and students, developing the skills so when they go home with their children, they too will know how to approach it, and so on and so forth, to make a difference. I also want, ma'am, to be able to say, we need more funding, more monetary resources to be injected into what is going on now. The cost will normally be higher because the kind of special needs equipment required will be more costly, because you want it to be of that kind of durability, that if it drops, it doesn't break as easily as a regular laptop or tablet or whatever. And therefore, the investment in these individuals will help to transform their lives, and it will speak volumes of us looking after our own people, despite whatever color or class or challenge or whatever may manifest itself. I also want, ma'am, to say that that novel program of testing for impairment, a part of the curriculum reform again, that too was shelved. And I did not ask your permission, ma'am, but the doctor, if you will allow me, Dr. Ben Stabler is the person who did the training with nurses and the teachers to be able to test for hearing, for vision, for speech, and other aspects of development that were lacking in those children who were differently able. And the polyclinics, after the children were tested, the polyclinics then did the following up. And the government provided the spectacles if they were necessary, the hearing aids, the speech therapists, and so. And as soon as the government changed in 2010, everything went flat. 10 years, a lost decade with the last administration that played the fool with education. And I believe that we must get back on track. It is going to be difficult now in this program that we're doing with the IMF, but we believe in the development of humankind, knowing that our only natural resources are our people. And unless we invest in them and plowing to them the resources that are necessary to be able to empower them and bring them to a level we will be spinning top in mud. It is not only about the intelligence of perhaps most of the honourable members in here who would have gone to these prestigious schools, and there's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, our differently able must benefit, because they will not be able to write any examination, most of them, unless they're intellectually sound, but might have the deformity or the challenge. And therefore, we must plan purposely for them. And so I believe that the sharing of best practices with the private schools, the public schools, and the NGOs is critical at this time. Challoner School, the Learning Center, the Derek Smith School, the NGOs, they have got profound aspects of development and services that I believe we can all share together. We need the synergies along with the Ministry of Health to be able to meet the needs and achieve the goals that we have set for our people, but in this particular respect, those who are living with those who are the differently able person.
Honourable member, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. I shall wrap up, ma'am, by saying that we need to look at income generational projects for them as well. The Ann Hill School had a project before the change in the administration of 2008, where they worked with a laundry. They had the laundry equipment set up, and they were able to launder bed sheets and bath towels and so to help them to get in tune with how to work in the business sector. That project was closed. I would want to recommend not only for a project of that to return, but for the private sector as well to take note of the needs of the disabled, because disability is not inability, and one can have a bright, shining mind and be able to perform while the body may not be able to cope as well. So I implore all those private sector agencies and the public ones to make opportunities available for those who are differently able. I also want, as I close, to say the Honourable Minister spoke about quality assurance and proper oversight of whatever construction takes place. I support that 100%. There's so much shoddy work done by some of those people who say they're contractors and business people and so, and only the taxpayers suffer because you have to come back next 2 years and do it over again. Who benefits? The builders. Who suffers? The Barbadian taxpayers. And so, ma'am, I close by saying, our people are our only natural resource, and we must cater to their needs. No one must be left behind. And as long as we work together, we aspire together, we will all achieve together and bring an element of comfort to the lives of all Barbadians, despite whatever situation they are in. I highly support this resolution, and I pray that as time goes by, we'll be able to make a more direct impact in the lives of our people as we seek to empower and enrich and guide them, that they know stigma and discrimination will not be in their faces, but only embracing and uplifting and praising them for the good that they can do once we handhold them and create the environment, the enabling environment that will make a change. I wish to thank you.
Thank you. Honourable member for St. Michael Southeast.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again.
Question is, I do now report to the Honourable Speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
chairman of committees has reported progress and asked for leave to sit again.
Mr. Speaker, the chairman has had to take leave, and I beg to move to request leave from the honourable host to allow the member for Christchurch South to be able to sit as the temporary chair.
Yes. The question is that the honourable member for Christchurch South be allowed to sit as chairman, temporary chairman. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. We'll go leave the chair again.
So that we can resume consideration of the resolution.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House continue to resolve itself in Standing Finance Committee for further consideration of this resolution. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. And we think the ayes have it.
There's only one.
I go next. I go next. I can absolutely tell you that. No, because said it before me, and I go next. Sorry? Oh, my man? But he knows.
This House is now in committee. The House is now in committee. And I call the Honourable Member St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to spend a few minutes contributing to this debate on the supplementary for the Hill School, and to note that much has been said, and I agree particularly with the Honourable Member for Christchurch West when he spoke to money spent in education being money well spent, and not just because he knows about spending money and spending money well, but I agree with him philosophically that money spent in education is money that is well spent. It is money that is spent to develop people, to increase their capacity, and so I would want to support this supplementary before this Standing Finance Committee. Now, education is something that is, Mr. Chair, close to my heart. I grew up in a house with 2 teachers. That is not normally a good thing for a youngster. The discipline is a bit more rigid than a youngster would like. But I also have the honor to represent a constituency that has 2 nursery schools, 5 primary schools, and 3 secondary schools when I include the Edna Nichols Center. And having those educational institutions in the constituency allows me the opportunity to see up close, personal, firsthand, how the system is working. And maybe unlike the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central, I've had the privilege, I really need to say I've had the privilege of being allowed to be involved in the work of the school by having good relationships with the leadership of all these schools. Of the 2 nurseries, 1 is private, 1 is government. Of the 5 primary schools, 3 are government-owned, publicly owned, 2 are private, and the secondary schools are all publicly owned. One of them, one of the primary schools, the All Saints Primary, has a unit which is designed particularly for persons, children with special needs. And so that school has the facility to address the particular requirements that young people, children with special needs will have. And so that has become more or less the center for special needs education, maybe not just in St. Peter, but probably in the north of the island. I want, however, Mr. Chair, to bring a little bit of a labor perspective to the discussion, and to say that schools ought to be seen as institutions of learning. Often we see schools as institutions for teaching, but I want to suggest that learning is the important activity that ought to take place in these institutions. And I say that because in order for this country to develop, and as we look around us and see aspects of the country developing and the world developing, that development comes from the ability of people to analyze, well, to learn, to analyze, and to think critically. Out of that comes inventions. Out of that critical thinking and analysis comes development, comes new ideas. And these new ideas, these inventions, these developments are the things that propel a country. And so we have to see schools and other educational institutions as institutions of learning, not just institutions of instruction. Now, that learning and that critical thinking brings me to something that we have been speaking to from a labor perspective for quite a while, especially as we see the change in work, the changes that technology brings to workplaces, the change that the development of society is bringing to workplaces. When I say that, I'm talking about things like technological advancement, artificial intelligence, all those other things, the internet, computerization, as well as other developments like the move into the green economy, the blue economy, the fact that our populations across the world, generally speaking, are aging, and now the care economy. And as my neighbor here, the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, would speak to from time to time, the orange economy, the creative economy. Now, the development of these new areas of economic activity means that as we go forward, every few years, jobs will disappear and new jobs will become available, but available for those who are prepared for them. And in order to be prepared for these new jobs, there will need to be in the minds of all of us the understanding that learning is a lifelong process. Not just learning to become better in our field of endeavor. We spoke earlier about the continuing education that many of the professional organizations will have for their members. Attorneys like yourself, accountants, the others, medical practitioners, continuing education. And in some cases, you get certification for that, and you can re-register. But, Mr. Chairman, I would also want to suggest to us that this lifelong learning, not just of the future, but the learning that we will have to engage in the present, also has to prepare us for switching careers. The lifelong learning of the present and the future is a mindset that allows us not just to develop in the area that we've chosen as our profession or as our career, but it has to be learning that allows us to transition across careers, because there will be jobs that will disappear in this world as technology advances and as new vistas open up in other areas of activity. And so schools have a very important role to play, because schools, especially at the nursery and primary and secondary levels, those schools are where the thinking of people is initially fashioned. And so if people are to develop the idea of lifelong learning, to develop within their professions or careers, or to transition to new professions and new careers, that understanding has to start in the school system. And I want to really emphasize that our schools must be places where we encourage our young people to think, to be creative, to analyze, and to really prepare themselves for what is to come in the future. The other aspect that I want to touch on, because I'm cognizant that there's not a lot of time, again, from my perspective in the Ministry of Labor. Now, this supplementary is to add additional classrooms at the Anthill School. I've spoken to the fact that schools must be places that encourage learning, and that is from the student's perspective, from the child's perspective. From the perspective of those who work in these school plants, whether they are teaching staff or non-teaching staff, and I deliberately use non-teaching because, and this is just me, but I hate the word ancillary to refer to people who work. Everybody who works in a school contributes to the education of children. Persons who benefit from schooling will often remark after they leave school that they've learned, in a lot of cases, more from non-teaching staff than they've learned from teaching staff. Life skills. There are lots of things that non-teaching staff will share with students. But what I want to speak to in terms of the school plan is that there has to be a greater emphasis on occupational safety and health. We have a problem. The Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South East spoke to it in her presentation. Too many of our buildings, but particularly our school buildings, are becoming problem buildings. Buildings where people are falling ill, buildings with mold, buildings, all kinds of challenges. What I want to say here today is that the safety and health officers of my ministry, as they share with me what they find when they visit school plants that are posing challenges to students and teachers and non-teaching staff, they are reporting that basic maintenance in school buildings is lacking. They are reporting that those who are paid by the taxpayers' dollars are not carrying out their duties in the best manner. Now, if it sounds as though I am beating up on anybody, then I think the beat up is going to have to happen. And the beat up is going to have to happen because the children of this country are spending 6 hours in these places. And so if I have to knock the knuckles of a few people to preserve the health of the children of the country, then I'm going to have to do it. Now, I will not do that, though, if the challenge relates to lack of equipment or lack of materials. We know what the last government, and I know the people of Barbados are getting a little bit tired of us harping back to the last government, so I'm not going to spend any inordinate amount of time dealing with that. We're in office now. We recognize the issues of the past. Our responsibility, given the limited resources we have, our responsibility is to provide the tools that those responsible for the cleaning of these buildings need in order to be able to carry out their duties effectively. And this government will commit to that. But once those materials are provided, I am calling, Mr. Chairman, for those who are charged with the responsibility of maintaining school buildings, keeping school buildings clean for children and teaching and non-teaching staff, to make sure they carry out their duties in an effective and efficient manner. The future of the country relies and depends on them. Because when a school has to be closed, and we had this issue in my constituency in Boscobel at the Elliott Belgrove Primary just a couple of months ago, when a school has to be closed for 3 or 4 or 5 days, those who suffer are the children. Exam dates are not rescheduled. The date for the common entrance, the Barbados Secondary School's entrance examination, is not rescheduled. Those who suffer are the children. Because if the syllabus is not completed within the time frame, then the ordinary people who live in Boscobel and Castle and Gaze and Collins and or Indian Ground or Malnaquan or Spikestown have to try now to find extra money at a time when money is not free-flowing, have to find extra money to try to send their children to lessons. The maintenance, the upkeep of our school plant is vitally important. Occupational safety and health is not just a matter for factories. It is not just a matter for office buildings. Occupational safety and health and maintaining facilities in good repair also applies to institutions of learning. And in my mind are even more important, because that is where the most important investment is taking place. The investment in the capacity building of young people to take their rightful place in our world, fulfilling their own aspirations, but also building the capacity of the country and allowing the country to be able to progress and to develop. And so there's need for maintenance plans. There is need for the materials for those charged with the responsibility to carry out that responsibility. Importantly as well, there is need for the monitoring of those charged with the responsibility. If a cleaner is not cleaning properly, somebody has allowed that to happen. I don't know if it is the principal. I don't know if there's an officer in the ministry who is responsible. That is not important. What is important is that there is somebody who ought to be reviewing the work of those charged with cleaning. And so if the cleaning isn't being done, if the maintenance isn't happening, somebody else is also responsible. And I want to ask that ministries, including the Ministry of Education, hold people accountable for what is really the task that they're being paid to do. I want to end just by adding my voice to the call for the reopening of the Alma Parish School. It is a commitment that this government has made. It is in our manifesto. We understand the restrictions that we have, because to reopen Alma Parish will call for some good funds. And if the Honourable Member for Christchurch West was the Honourable Member for St. Peter, I wouldn't have to, but he wouldn't have to say here. But I am not he. And so I would want to call, to add my voice, I think was to the voice of the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, to ask that some civil society organizations who may have the means to assist government, maybe to look at the Alma Parish School as a project that they can engage in, the refurbishment so that we can reopen. The whole matter of not leaving anybody behind is important. And while the standing orders really doesn't like people to repeat, in this chamber, I think that matter is one that every honourable member ought to state. This is a government that believes that everybody must be taken along. And the Alma Parish School allowed for persons who would have had challenges in various ways, maybe some behavioral, some learning. It allowed for those persons to be accommodated in an institution, in a facility that allowed them to be able to reach their potential, allow them to be able to develop. We cannot allow for situations where persons living with any kind of disability, whether it is a physical disability, maybe a psychological disability, a cognitive disability, we must ensure that we provide the facilities that will allow all of our people to develop to their maximum potential. The maximum is going to be different for different people, but everybody needs the opportunity to be able to develop. The Alma Parish School was one of those institutions, one of those facilities that allowed for it, and we in St. Peter, but Barbados generally, looks forward to the time when that school will reopen and cater for the children who need that kind of facility. And so with those remarks, Mr. Chair, I want again to say that I support this supplementary, I support investment in education, and I'm calling on all stakeholders, children, teachers, non-teaching staff, and Barbados generally, to support education, support the educational system, and ensure that no child in Barbados is deprived of the opportunity of reaching his or her maximum potential. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Member, I rewarded you a few minutes for your outstanding eloquence and depth of thought, and I would have stopped you, but then you went on to the issue of Alma Parish, and I thought that was a worthy subject. But this is not to say that other members will have this luxury. I think I now recognize the Honourable Member for St. James North.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to support this resolution for $175,000 to be given to the Ann Hill School. I know the area very well, sir, having gone to school at New Pine Primary, as it was then called, now called Wilkie Comerbatch, in the same compound. And my sister, having gone to school at the now Irving Wilson School, then the School for the Deaf, also in the same compound, sir. So I speak with first-hand knowledge of the area, and any monies given to improve the infrastructure of any school which caters to children with disabilities in this country is well spent, sir. We have to look at the history, sir, of education for children with disabilities. I would start, in 2000, when this Parliament, under the last Barbados Labour Party administration, would have brought a green paper and then a white paper in May and August 2000, respectively, with one of the core policy objectives being the provision of access to education for all children with disabilities at all educational levels in an integrated setting wherever possible, with specialized facilities for those needing such facilities. So as has been said before, and as it is worth repeating, sir, the question is allowing, permitting, as reasonably as possible in all the circumstances, children with disabilities, differently abled children, sir, to fulfill their maximum potential as any other child, as any other, in fact, individual in Barbados must be allowed to fulfill their potential, sir. There can't be any question of anyone being left behind, sir. It has not always been the case, as the Honourable Member for St. Thomas spoke about, where children with disabilities have been allowed to flourish, sir. We all remember the days a few decades ago where they were hidden in houses, not educated, not allowed to develop. So thankfully those days are gone, but we still haven't come to the place where we ought to be in terms of Barbados being geared towards the maximum potential of children with disabilities being realized. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South East, who has led this debate, spoke about her ministry and she personally working towards a special needs policy, and I look forward to that policy being brought to Cabinet. As the Honourable Member said, in the next few months and then to this Parliament. We've been fooling around with this for too long, sir. As she has said, that such a paper has been stuck in draft form in the Ministry of Education for years now. That policy needs to be developed and to be brought into the force of law in this country, sir. In addition to that, of course, the Education Act, which I know my honourable colleague Minister is looking at, needs to be in terms of reform and modernisation. And whenever that is done, sir, I look forward to debating on the issue of creating a right, sir, legislative right, as there is not now, for children with disabilities to receive the same education as children without disabilities. Because a lot of people in Barbados do not realise that children with disabilities effectively do not have the right to quality education, to free education, as other children, because practically a lot of children with disabilities have to pay to go to special schools. Thankfully, some of the international charities and foundations that are here that were spoken of by the Honourable Minister Member of Parliament for the city. Thankfully, some of these foundations and charitable organizations, the Maria Holder Trust, Derek Smith Trust, Sandy Lane Trust, help fund these schools, such as the school in Perry, Gaphoff, Robert Street. Of course, Derek Smith has his own multi-million-dollar school, $20 million in layers. Some of us were at that opening a few years ago. Thankfully, they have come to the rescue and they fund the education of children with disabilities whose parents would otherwise not have been able to afford such education. But the reality is that our Education Act speaks about free education, primary and secondary level, from age 4 to 16 for children, and practically a lot of children with disabilities are not within that zone. So we have an urgent need to revise the Education Act when that is done, to include this right for all, sir, because a society has to be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable, as Mahatma Gandhi said. And unless we bring all into the web, as we, this political party charged as it is by the people of Barbados, to move us into the third decade of the 21st century as, again, the leading small island developing state in the world, we cannot afford to leave behind children or indeed people with disabilities. People with disabilities, as the Poverty Condition Fund study into poverty conditions, which I know the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central would have first-hand knowledge of. It was funded by the Caribbean Development Bank in 2010 study, spoke about where it said that at that time 20% of people in Barbados were living below poverty line, and out of those 20%, 20% of those persons were persons with disabilities. Now, persons with disabilities are said only to make up 5% of the people of Barbados, and therefore at 20% of 20%, sir, people with disabilities were in fact 4 times below the poverty line in terms of category of persons than the average in Barbados. And this is not something that we ought to be proud of. I know that a census, I believe, will be due next year. Census is due every 10 years, and we will look to see if there has been much change in that. But we have the duty as a government, as a state, to improve on these figures. Certainly, training of teachers in special needs has to be a priority of the Ministry of Education. I know they're working on that, giving more people, more teachers, the incentives and the funding, the scholarships to go and train in special needs, because this is something that has to be done on a continuous basis. We have to look, sir, at buses for children with disabilities, differently able children to get to school, because it is okay to say that you're providing accommodation for them, to retrofitting accommodation, and in terms of the ramps and giving the technology, the braille and the communication devices and the integrated systems at the school for them to learn, but is also another thing to be able to transport them to the school, something that is a problem in Barbados. When this political party was last in office, they had 5 buses owned by the Transport Board under the last for children with disabilities, retrofitted to that effect. That went down to 1 under the last government, sirs. They failed then to repair those buses when they needed repairs, but that was the legacy that the last government has left this country, unfortunately, sir. Barbados is, of course, a party to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Having signed that convention on the 19th of July 2007, a convention that came into force by ratification of the determined number of countries in May 2008, and then was in fact ratified by the then government of Barbados on the 27th of September 2013. So the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, United Nations Convention, even though not passed into law in Barbados, has mandated Barbados at international level to observe certain norms and to observe the terms of that treaty. And of course that treaty speaks about inclusive education, sir, because this is what has been determined is best for children with disabilities. Inclusive education at all levels, directed to the full development of the human potential and the sense of dignity and self-worth of children with disabilities, and the strengthening of respect for their human rights, their fundamental freedoms, and their human diversity. Essentially, sir, it speaks towards allowing children with disabilities, in fact persons with disabilities, to participate fully and effectively in a free society, to be able to become active members of a community, sir, as any individual has that right to be, to become independent and worthy citizens in the national development of this country. Because there are persons with disabilities, a lot of them, sir, and we all know, have as much, in fact more, intelligence than many people without disabilities. It may be that they're blind, sir, but nothing is wrong with their brain. Maybe that they're deaf, sir. We have examples in Barbados, not only in Barbados, but throughout the world, sir. Children with disabilities, young adults going to University of the West Indies and doing well, some even getting first-class honors, sir, at law school. No, they have the right to full potential, sir, and I would like to see a situation, in fact, where the Ministry of Education can specially fund these children. In fact, when the last government, sir, totally in their lack of wisdom and their malice, removed state-funded education for tuition fees for Barbadians at the University of the West Indies, I called on the then government to exempt persons with disabilities from that, continue to pay for them at university. They of course ignored me. So the Honourable Minister of Education and this government, in its wisdom, a year ago restored state-funded tuition fees at University of the West Indies so children and young adults with disabilities can again access universities. But we have to do more, sir. We have to give them greater chances and opportunities to continue as the convention, the United Nations Convention speaks towards access of tertiary education, towards greater access to vocational training, towards greater access to adult education and to lifelong learning, sir. As the Honourable Member for St. Peter just spoke about, towards life skills on an equal basis with others, towards their reasonable accommodation. So all of this is part of what makes a country great as we aim for Barbados to be again. Sir, we need, of course, to look as a government to create the environment, the policies, the laws to speak towards this fundamental issue, sir. And this government has been doing that. You will recall that we brought, sir, and I brought in December, the amendment to the Immigration Act, which removed the Victorian legacy of this country, the highly discriminatory clause under which an immigration officer could prohibit a person who was, quote-unquote, an imbecile, sir. Now, I don't know what that is, sir, because that had some in here on the government side in the last parliament, the truth. I don't know what an imbecile is, sir. How? Because someone has a disability, they're suddenly an imbecile. And it also said people who are visually blind, sir, that an immigration officer could have prevented them on whatever discriminatory basis coming into Barbados. So we removed that clause, sir. Totally offensive. Idiots, feeble-minded, all of that had, sir. And it took this government, led by this Honourable Prime Minister, sir, to bring to Parliament the removal of that Victorian clause, sir. we, sir, have brought as a policy the reality of 1% of persons with disabilities getting government procurement and contracts, sir. Cabinet of Barbados and this Parliament subsequently have agreed as a matter of policy to that 1% of all government contracts and procurement opportunities will go to people with disabilities, sir. A fantastic initiative, sir. The challenge now is, of course, to put people with disabilities in a position where they can access and take advantage of that cabinet policy, sir, because it's all right for a government to pass policies, pass legislation, but the implementation. And I look forward, sir, and I've spoken, sir, with the stakeholders on persons with disabilities, and of course, sir, even though in my position as a cabinet minister, I no longer now able to serve directly as directors of the councils for disabled and the associations that I used to and be their legal advisor, sir, voluntarily as I used to be. I still keep in touch, sir, and I certainly urge them to be in a position and urge those policymakers and advisors in government to put people with disabilities in a position where they can take advantage of this tremendous initiative by this government, sir. I know, sir, of course, that the Cabinet of Barbados last year also agreed to continue the policy making of the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Bill, sir, which has been around for a while, since 2015. Of course, the last government doing nothing about seeking to bring it to this Parliament to make it the law of Barbados, sir. And the Honourable Member for St. Peter, who just spoke, his capacity as Minister of Labour, we spoke about it yesterday, sir, actively looking to get that bill fast-tracked to be brought back to Cabinet and back into this House of Assembly, sir, because that bill will legislatively prevent the discrimination of persons with disabilities in the workforce both within the public sector and the private sector of Barbados, is something that is absolutely necessary, something that, again, it would be in fulfillment of our international commitments as a signatory to the United Nations Convention on Persons with Disabilities, sir. This is totally essential, sir, because persons with disabilities have to have as equal an opportunity in this country to be able to work in areas that they can work, sir. I mean, there are countries such as Jamaica that even before they had disabilities legislation had a quota for reservation of 3% of government jobs for persons with disabilities. So I'm an advocate for that kind of affirmative action policy to help people with disabilities, sir. We have to do it. This government has been doing its best. I look forward to the day when I will be contributing to a debate on disabilities legislation in this Parliament. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, sir, one of the most caring politicians ever to step into this Parliament, that she will ensure that her ministry works towards that, sir, because, of course, I would have brought a private member's bill in March 2015 calling for that, sir. And again, we are committed at international level as a signatory to the United Nations Convention to bring about that legislative intervention in this Parliament of Barbados, sir. Sir, the Honourable Minister of Education knows she has my full support when it comes to education for persons with disabilities, sir, because education is the key by which most vulnerable people who have been born in a socially advantageous position, people who, because of the circumstances of life, need government intervention to assist them to the next level, sir, need the support of the state. And, sir, I am happy to be party to a Parliament that brings this resolution to this House, sir, and in any way looks to financially assist the improvement and the amelioration of life for children with disabilities and for persons with disabilities in general. I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I wish to support, as all the other honourable members did, that which is before this House. Sir, and I do so like the Honourable Member for St. James North, having my education, I did not even know, at the same primary school. Having gone to Wilkie-Camelback Primary, which at the time, I think in his time it was called New Prime Primary, in my time it was called Wilkie-Camelback School. And having studied alongside persons, sir, who at the time, I mean, it's good the way we've evolved, because at the time the words that were used to describe such persons were handicapped, invalid, all kinds of things. And you know, sir, a lot of what we practice as children is taught to us. A lot of the behaviors we carry, sir, are taught to us. We shared, Wilkie-Camelback shared a pasture, sir, with the school, but it was almost like an invisible line you were not supposed to cross to go to the other side. And as the Honourable Member for St. James North said also, you know, it was a case where persons with disabilities, sir, were almost hidden. And we weren't allowed to mesh with them, but you know, children are children. And in many cases, sir, friendships would evolve naturally, almost an organic way, notwithstanding the fact that a lot of the pressures that were placed on the children, societal pressures, sir, would serve to only interfere between the children and the natural relationships that children tend to form. And so I begin this way, sir, because I feel that we need to have a conversation about the nature of the country in which we would want to live. the nature of the society, sir, that we would want to participate in, sir, the kind of society we would wish to shape, the kind of structure and social structure, sir, we would want to advocate for, and through our actions, sir, serve to perpetuate. The motto at Wilkie Commonwealth, sir, is we persevere, we succeed. I don't know if it was the motto when it was New Primary, but it's the motto of Wilkie Commonwealth. We persevere, sir, we succeed. And sometimes, sir, you know, you could persevere and persevere and persevere, and it's difficult to succeed, not because you do not have your own intrinsic value or not because you haven't worked hard, but because the society is so structured as to disadvantage one group for whatever reason. I mean, our society is disadvantaged, in some cases, women. It disadvantages poor people, sir. People based on their sexual orientation, sir. Society serves sometimes to reinforce these, in my mind, sir, these prejudices. And if there is one group that has been a victim of these prejudices, sir, it has been persons with disabilities. And, you know, there's a proverb, sir, Proverb 31:9, where that verse, I used to have it on my, back then when people had MSN. Open your mouth and judge righteously and plead the cause of the poor and the needy. And I had it on my MSN, sir, I have it still on my wall. You plead the cause of the poor and the needy. Open your mouth and judge righteously. Because I know the stumbling blocks that people face in this world many times, sir, are some that we create. And that we make a bad situation worse by virtue of our own limitations, sir. We oftentimes, sir, we see something, we make judgments about people, and then we go on to treat people based on those judgments and not necessarily based on what is before us, sir. So I know that a lot of the persons that I've come into contact with, sir, who are persons with disability or persons who are differently able, are capable of extreme things, amazing things, and that we do not give them the opportunity to achieve their fullest potential. When I was a student at KFIL, there was, and it was a rarity, there was a student, sir, a good friend, I won't call his name, a good friend of mine, and I remember him, sir, wheeling himself around, but he had a motorized chair around the university. And how difficult it was, even at that time, for him to be able to access classes in university, because university, I think, has changed now. But at that time, the university was not constructed to accommodate persons with disabilities. And as much as he wanted to get to class, sir, it was very difficult for him. And the most trouble he had was being able to get up to the guild just to be able to hang out with other people. I can still, as I talk to you, sir, can visualize him in his chair turning to me one afternoon asking me to lift him up the stairs to get to the guild so he could play dominoes and be a normal child, because at the end of the day, that's all he is, or was. He's no longer with us, God. But at the end of the day, that's all he was. But I remember him turning to me and saying, as other children passed, and he said, "Kurt, would you lift me up the stairs?" And that the fact is that in that moment, sir, there are very few moments that I carry in my heart the way that I carry that moment, because it meant that he trusted me. But it also meant, sir, that the society that we live in, the schools that we attend, the infrastructure that we have built, sir, was not meant to accommodate him. And in the Pine Nook, sir, where I grew up, when I think about the football field, to get to the field is also a hill. It's rough. Even today, it's still almost the same. I mean, now, I think there's as you lead up to the community center, I think under this Labour Party, there's been some construction. You can access the field. In my constituency, sir, it's still the same. So we build housing areas, units, and that we don't build with this in mind. You cannot access the playing field. So it becomes very difficult for me to accept that we are talking about everyone matters, when the things that are simple but of fundamental importance, sir, people are treated as if they do not matter. But notwithstanding all of this, there is an amazing capacity to care and to show love. And even though our society has not been kind to them, sir, in many ways, persons with disabilities are still very kind. And they still, notwithstanding all of this, have this amazing capacity to care. Sir, I believe that this really is their ability, and that the disability is ours. And that persons who think that they have all of the skills, sir, all of the competencies, all of the facets that should allow them to live a normal life, sir, often are the ones with a disability. Because it is in our judgment of other people, sir, that we fall short. And I had the privilege, sir, of working at the Child Care Board, sir, for a few years, about 5 years. And there is a children's home in Haynesville that was built to cater to persons who have special needs. And while I have the greatest respect for the officers in the Child Care Board, because I saw how they worked and how they worked with children, sir, in cases where children, in many cases, were victims of neglect or of abuse. But the children with special needs, sir, were treated with such love and care and attention at that home in Haynesville. In fact, the staff, the staff in Haynesville would often refer to the children with disabilities as my children. These are my children. And they were treated with so much love and with so much care, sir, and that the sacrifices that they made, I heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast speak to the fact that sometimes teachers would go out their way to spend their own money and to attend to these children. But I also saw that in the children's home, putting up there. Oh yes, and the Honourable Member for St. Michael East was Minister, of course, when I was the manager of the Child Care Board. And I saw children parties being thrown, but people going in their own pockets, sir, and making sure that these children, sir, were taken care of. And that is the kind of society that I feel we need to live in. Because at the end of the day, the fundamental question is, what kind of society do we wish to create? What kind of society do we wish to live in? And sir, we say we will leave no one behind, sir, but that has to mean something. It has to mean something. And we have to create a world, sir, where everybody has an equal opportunity. Now, equal opportunity doesn't mean that everybody has to go on to do the same thing. I mean, it is obvious that there's certain things that certain people cannot do. I can't, sir, ever in my life become. I have a friend of mine, sir, he tells me all the time he never went to school, but he does more than me. He could build a house, paint that house, tile that house. I mean, skills that I wish I had. But to make a society functional, you need different people doing different things. That's the nature of making a society functional, sir. And that if we continue through our own limitations and through our own short-sightedness and through our own judgment to leave out portions of our society, what kind of society will we create? And fundamentally, sir, that is what I feel we have to address. I also have, so I went to school, sir, and I dealt with it, I worked with it, but in my constituency, I also have a special needs school, sir. And I visited that school very recently, and one of the parents told me that since they moved their child to this school, the transition in the child has been phenomenal. And the thing that she said to me, sir, that stays with me, is that of all the things that are done at this school in my constituency, which is a great school for persons with disability, and I would urge that the government should offer as much support to this school as possible, that her daughter, when she got into the car on evenings, every evening would be traumatized. And she only recently figured it out that it was the bell, the school bell, would traumatize her child. But at this school, there is no bell. So that on the evening she picks up her child, it is a completely different state that the child is in. I'm saying, sir, that we do not properly understand or assess what is happening, but that there are very simple little things that we can do to make life comfortable for people. And that this student now, sir, in this new environment is beginning to blossom and come into her own. Things that perhaps would never have happened if she had stayed in another school. So I believe, sir, that we need to look at a new direction. And how do we care? And how is that care manifested, sir? I know, because, sir, I worked at the Child Care Board, and because I spend a lot of time doing community work, sir, that oftentimes for persons with special needs, we'd have small groups, a kind of small group education. I know sometimes, sir, we would have a special kind of instruction in classroom. And as the Honourable Member for St. James North spoke to, sir, sometimes we'd have this mixed ability classroom where we have people with disabilities and persons without disability. Because it's not every child that you have to have separate and distinct. Some children, sir, do better when they're in a mixed environment, sir. And sometimes you may have that. But whatever the situation, and however it is, sir, we need to have constant support for the parents, sir, and we need to have constant support for the teachers, sir. It is not easy. And we've been banning about this idea of a respite care facility for years. For years. I would love to see this respite care facility come. But, sir, there has to be a varied approach to developing this. I know, sir, that in some cases now they're using animals for service and for therapy in schools. They're using animals, sir, to help persons with special needs. And so it's not only about helping somebody, a dog, a CNA dog, to help somebody to walk the street. It is not only about a dog or an animal that can pull a wheelchair, sir, but sometimes there is an emotional development that comes when you allow children to interact with animals. There is an emotional connection that children form with animals, sir, because animals, first of all, don't know how to judge people the way people judge people. Animals connect with you, sir, on a level. And they understand, sir, your emotional needs. And, sir, there is that too happening. I would like to say it expanded in Barbados. In my constituency, I see people taking children, and I applaud it sometimes for taking children with special needs on horseback rides down to the beach. And I think it is a good thing. And I oftentimes now see not the persons in my constituency because they're good horses. But I don't know if you see it sometimes, sir. People know, I digress a bit, but I see people with horses, sir, and the horses look as if, you know, they're leaving the horses to starve, sir.
Honourable Member, don't digress too much.
I won't, sir.
I want you to compress the rest of your speech into 3 minutes.
I will bring it home in 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much.
But I'm saying, sir, that we have these persons with special needs, sir, and that this new development, this working with animals, sir, has been shown to produce tremendous results. Tremendous results. But if, at the end of the day, sir, we are a society that does not care, it is manifested in all things. And I'm saying to you, Honourable Mr. Chairman, sir, that we have seen it in the way people treat to their animals, too. I would like to see animals working with persons with special needs, because I know it works. But I feel that we have to also treat to animals in Barbados differently. I don't know if, Mr. Chairman, sir, you saw that which was on Facebook recently. That which was on Facebook recently, sir, in relation to the way a dog was treated, sir, and left to die on a chain. Left to die on a chain, sir. I am saying that that is wrong, and that there has to be penalties for people who do things like that. As a matter of fact, furthermore, as we can go as far away from the way people treat animals to the point where they leave an animal to die, I am saying we need to integrate animals into the training process, into the development process. Because there is a big relationship between the way we treat to our animals and the development of a country, sir. I feel that Barbados can benefit, persons with special needs can benefit, sir, if we integrate animals into the way that we deal with some of these situations, sir. And I will support it strongly, but overall there has to be a new way of treating to persons who have disabilities. A whole set of new techniques. And the one thing that we cannot do, sir, is continue to hide them. I've known children, sir, I've had friends, sir, I've known people, sir, who've had children with disabilities, family with disabilities, and then, you know, they never introduce you to them. Because it is our own limitation, sir. So at the end of the day, sir, I want to close as I began, which is to suggest, sir, that we have to ask ourselves, what kind of society do we wish to create? What will be the role for persons with disability? What will be the role for those of us who have the responsibility for teaching them? What will be the role of parents, sir? What will be the support system for the parents and for the teachers? It is not easy. And what will be the role of the persons in this society who have leadership? And that we must judge ourselves by the fact that we sir, we found a situation, sir, and we've moved the needle in a substantive way. That is how I feel we will make a difference in this country. And that the real test will be how we treat the persons with disabilities, sir, at the end of the day. And with that, sir, I wish to support this. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. I recognize the honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to fully support this resolution before the chamber, cognizant of the fact that my son, for whom he hasn't spoken for the past 9 years, sir, as you are well aware, is autistic. And as a parent having to deal with those issues, I really want to support this resolution, because the difficulties that parents, certainly of persons with special needs, face in this country are significant. And anything that a government can do, sir, to help to facilitate young children in helping to find themselves in a world that is very complicated, sir, and as parents navigate not just the educational system, but certainly a society that isn't always fully aware as to the challenges that parents face of those persons with special needs. I just wanted to make sure that I made my intervention on that vein, because when my son was he had turned 4, and obviously needed to be able to go to school. And I recall at the time, sir, being granted a place at one of the public institutions. And I have to say to you, sir, that the genesis of this resolution is to help enhance the surroundings of the Anthill School. But at 4 years old, sir, on visiting the institution that was on offer with respect to the public, I had to say to you, sir, as a parent and as a Barbadian, at that point, both, certainly my wife and I, have benefited from all that Barbados has had to offer with respect to education. But, sir, the state of the plant that faced us at that point in time, sir, in good conscience, I really could not allow my son to be in that space. And the truth is, sir, it shamed me as a Barbadian to come to that realization, because at that particular point, sir, in 2012, when we had to make that decision, having looked at alternatives within the private space, immediately the choice was clear. And therefore, my wife and I, sir, we opted to place our son in a private facility and bore the expense, obviously, of that decision, simply because the state of the physical plant at that institution, which the government was seeking to place my son, I did not feel, sir, at that time comfortable with respect to putting my son in that environment. Nothing to do with the teachers or anything, but physically, sir, it was not good enough. And therefore, as a member of this government, I would support any effort, certainly, to enhance the surroundings for persons with disabilities. And I want to make sure that the public is well aware that this government certainly will be taking these matters quite seriously, because as persons who are most vulnerable in our society, sir, and I know that we still have a lot of work to do with respect to being able to provide for those persons who are truly vulnerable. But this is an exercise, sir, where we also have to enhance and look at what are the support systems in place for parents with persons with disabilities. And I want to say to you, sir, that whilst we are talking about the physical infrastructure in this case, over the course of the last 8.5 years, sir, we've had to spend quite a bit of money with respect to speech therapy. Quite a bit of money, sir, with respect to occupational therapy. quite a bit of money, sir, with respect to behavioral therapy, quite a bit of money, sir, with respect to vision therapy. And the reality is, sir, that persons with special needs, and certainly those on the autistic spectrum, sir, face many challenges that normal parents do not face in this country. And to the extent that as a government we are seeking to respond to support families in the context of being able to lift the fortunes of individuals and communities in this country, we also have to be mindful that increasingly, sir, over the past certainly 10 to 15 years, there's been a significant increase in the number with respect to the population of persons with disabilities in this country, a number of persons presenting themselves on the autism spectrum, sir. And therefore, we have to, as a matter of part of our public policy provision, not just as it relates to spaces for persons for education, but there are other support mechanisms, sir, that are required to be able to help support families. Unfortunately, sir, whilst we have been in a position to help to finance these additional expenditures that outside of food and clothing and the traditional things that families have to provide for their children, persons with special needs, sir, parents of children with special needs, sir, also have additional expenditures that have to be undertaken in order for these children to be able to live in their best lives in Barbados. There's still a lot of work to be done, sir. And certainly in working with the Ministry of People Empowerment and certainly with the Ministry of Education, sir, we would want to put in place as soon as we can a set of measures that will make it a little easier for these persons, but it's something that we're going to have to work through and be very specific about how and what additional potential support can be had with respect to providing for families with special needs. And it is not easy, sir, because I can say to you, as a parent this morning, I took my son to speech therapy before I came to Parliament. And it is a very intense and a painful thing, sir, because not to have a conversation with a child is a very heart-wrenching and a very emotional experience. And a lot of us take these things for granted. And the reality is that we need to be able to support our children in all their capacities, and I want to say that in as much as my son is autistic, we also must recognize that, and I want to support certainly the member for the city who made the point that we in Barbados, we spend a lot of money on education. But the way that we spend that money, sir, now has to be rooted in a sense in unearthing what is the talent that every individual possesses, and therefore we must not seek to streamline and push everybody through the same door in a real sense. And so what's my plea here this afternoon, sorry, is to make a case certainly for families, support for families with children of special needs. I think as we go through this reform exercise within education, that we must recognize that we must try to unearth that which is the true potential of all Barbadians. And as a government, we will seek to provide an environment for that to be able to be done, but it means that as a society that we must be conscious that those who are most vulnerable, sir, there must be a special place with respect to how they are treated and to the extent that the resources allow for government to be able to do. And I want to say, sir, that as a young member of Parliament, one of my, as I said, it is really a challenge being a parent of someone who is autistic. But one of my constituents made a charge to me, sir, which it kind of blindsided me from the perspective that there's an expectation, certainly, that, and she said to me quite clearly, sir, and quite plainly, that I am not doing enough with respect to dealing with persons with special needs, not just in the constituency, but certainly in the country. And it was a very jarring feedback, sir, because whilst we have sought to work to create an environment collectively for persons in this country, it reminded me, sir, that clearly persons have expectations of all of us, and certainly myself, that I was not even acutely aware that was being expected of me. And the challenge of being a parent of a son who is autistic and balancing that with public policy and intervention, one often has to be very careful about how you project the public policy and how it's implemented. But I understand, sir, what that expectation is, simply because I live it every day. And to the extent that that can be articulated as part of government's policy, I find it is obviously important. And I certainly would want to make sure that as we move forward, that on these matters, that the government is responding in a way that is both not is responsible, but as I said, allows for families who live with the challenges of persons with special needs. And I must say to you, sir, that one of the fears that I have, my wife has, and I know that all parents of persons with special needs have, would be what happens to your child in the event that something happens to you. And the Prime Minister, we've spoken about some of these issues, and as I said, it's something that we now have to work through with the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elderly Affairs and the various stakeholders, because we have committed as a government to being able to put various structures in place to deal with these issues. It's something that I would not want to contemplate, but it's the reality of life. And sir, I would say that I support this resolution, but I want to say to the many thousands of parents out there in this country that this government and myself, that we are working to make sure that we can create a framework that gives parents and families some peace of mind that the government is working on their behalf, and that the well-being of their children, either as minors or as they come into adulthood, that we will have an appropriate framework in place that supports them as families, so that as parents exit this space, that they can feel comfortable that there's a space, certainly, for their children to be taken care of. That work has not yet been completed, but I give this Honourable Chamber the assurance that we will work with the various ministries and agencies to make sure that not just within a school setting, but as children with special needs become adults, that not just as we've done with respect to the procurement, but we have the appropriate mechanisms to be able to respond, to give these persons a sense of dignity, to live in this society as Barbadians. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And to say to you that we are all indebted to you for sharing a personal experience. And it is probably no consolation to you, but in you, your family is very well represented in terms of the power of speech. And we thank you very much. I wish your son well. I recognize the Honourable Leader of the House, St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too would want to echo those sentiments as well in relation for the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. It is no easy task to raise a child with any form of disability, whether intellectual, whether physical impairment or otherwise. It is also no easy task as even minister to be able to recognize that we have limited resources, but we have a lot to do in terms of being able to keep up, to be able to allow parents to be able to cope with the challenges that their children are facing, but equally to be able to provide the support systems that are necessary across the educational system for teachers who also require the support as well. Let me just thank all honourable members for their contributions. I sought not to intervene too much because I believe that this is one of those issues where even though we have 3 hours to debate the supplementary, that it is an issue which I believe touches almost every member in this chamber in some way in their constituency or in their own personal lives. And while it is not a contentious resolution, it is one that I believe members should have been given the opportunity to be able to at least contribute and say a few words as it relates to the request for the sums of money of $175,000 to be allocated to basically outfit the 2 classrooms that are necessary for the students at the Anthill School. I know that the 107 students presently, along with the complement of staff at the school, are going to be eternally grateful for the start of this project. It has been something that has been ongoing for a long time and anticipated for some time. I know that it will ease the pressure on the classrooms. The reality is that there are still some other environmental factors at the school which have been impacting on the teachers as well. And we're going to try to obviously address a number of those concerns hopefully before the beginning of the September term, and also be able to do a number of the ongoing works that are required at the facility. But in relation to a number of the issues raised by my colleagues, I just wanted to just touch on a few things as I wrap up. I know that there were some concerns about the aesthetics at these institutions, trying to ensure that our school plants are more pleasing to the eye. I am a firm supporter that we need to have our school plants looking and feeling like they're places that children want to attend. We have been able to partner with some businesses in the respective communities and some large corporate entities to be able to start to work on some murals across the schools, and also to be able to outfit the classrooms with a bit more aesthetics. So that is coming, because I think that the cream-colored paint has lent itself to persons just marking it up, and it's been easier to deface that than if you have stimulating images, particularly in the school environment. And particularly for children who are special needs, you know, you also have to ensure that the environment is stimulating as well. So we've started that process not just at the special needs institutions in relation to Anthill, but also across all of the special needs facilities across the schools. In relation to speech therapy, what is interesting is that we have attempted on several occasions, it would seem, to basically send persons overseas to be able to have, whether it's national development scholarships, to be able to specialize in this area. One of our biggest challenges is that sometimes the people don't come back. The students have benefited from the funding from the Barbados government, but again, the opportunities in terms of what, and it happens with other scholarship winners and other national development scholarship winners from time to time. The reality is that we have to start to create the framework for persons to want to come back to Barbados. I have certainly started the discussions in relation to being able to partner with entities outside that provide some of these services to see if we can perhaps get some of the human resources into Barbados to help complement the existing stock. But speech therapy, occupational therapy is really a major area in which we need the resources in Barbados if we are going to help to provide some of the support systems that are necessary to families as well. I would want to invite the Honourable Member, Minister for Transport and Works, to please ensure that in relation to not only Anthill, but also in relation to other special needs facilities, that when the buses do come into the island in the near future, that priority is given to the special needs schools. I know firsthand that there are challenges that some parents have had, particularly because their children, when you are autistic, or even Asperger's, you have Asperger's syndrome, you end up in a situation where noise and the interference of noise can basically create a reaction that it wouldn't in others. And therefore, being able to have environments where children can basically get to school safely, but also with all of the other distractions, is something that we have to, as a government, make a priority. I want to thank the Honourable Member who has donated to the Arthur Smith School, because I do believe it is the model that needs to be embarked on by all Honourable Members of this House. I would hope that their constituents are knocking on their doors and requesting their assistance in their respective constituency in relation to the schools. I know the Honourable Member for St. Peter and I were at a church service. We were at a funeral yesterday, and he indicated to me how many number of schools he had in his constituency, and I wouldn't want him to have the burden of trying to repair all and to paint all and to support all, but I do urge all Honourable Members to get more involved within the respective communities as well, and to also work with us in the ministry to be able to help support the schools also. With respect to the issue of specialist schools, that is definitely direction that we have to go. It is our mandate as a ministry to ensure that the area of technical and vocational skills is something which is not secondary in education, but certainly something that people recognize, just like the academic areas, that there is adequate support for those areas. And equally in relation to special needs, there are students who have excelled and want to excel in these areas, and that is why we've been putting the resources into the area to ensure that they too can obtain the CVQ qualifications as well. Now, one major point that I believe that has resonated with me throughout the debate is perhaps the call by all members to try to end the discrimination and certainly the stigma associated in this area with children who have disabilities or children who learn differently in some form or fashion. And I too would want to support and echo the call for us to be part of the sensitization program and the education that is necessary to allow persons to recognize that each child does matter, and that disability does not mean inability to be able to perform or to be able to get the best out of any particular child. I therefore, Mr. Chairman, would ask that this resolution, having gotten the support of all honourable members, that we can certainly applaud ourselves for being able to start to take the steps to be able to do the necessary works at this particular facility. It is not by any means the last thing that needs to be done at this facility or any others, but I believe that it sends a message that we are very serious about this area, that we recognize that with partnerships with the Ministry of Health, that we have to work at testing children earlier, and I do support the call for the Ministry of Education and certainly the Ministry of Health to be able to work more closely together to be able to identify the problems that confront us in both ministries. Again, the principle here, sir, is that we have to test early. Testing is something you will constantly hear me speaking of, whether it is in relation to criterion reference tests, whether it is in relation to diagnostic testing. It is critical that if people are going to be able to plan their lives, they understand what it is that are their challenges. And we have seen too many children falling through the cracks as a result of that inability to test quick enough and to be able to respond as a society and certainly as a government to the challenges that are facing our society. I just want to remind honourable members that many of the persons who have succeeded across the globe, you know, in Barbados, sometimes people don't like to talk about challenges or disabilities, but I think that for those, I hope that that will start to change over time. But I do feel that we have seen a lot of persons across the world who have been successful. Sometimes they have a little quirk, as we want to refer to it as, but those persons are, you know, very excellent in their particular area of study. Because even if you take somebody with Asperger's, usually they tend to fixate on a particular area to the exclusion of everything else, but it also brings a certain level of excellence in that particular area. I think as a society, we have to start to be more empathetic to persons who have differences. I know certainly I experienced my own challenges recently, and I think I must say that it gave me, while I was very empathetic before, it gave me an even, you know, entirely different perspective on people who are different or going through things where people sometimes may come to judge you. And so for me, my thrust, while it has always been to ensure that we pays particular attention to persons who have special needs or persons who learn different or behave different, it is even greater now in terms of my thrust to ensure that we bring that equality across the system, and that inclusive education is not something that we just talk about, but something that we actually start to make a mental shift, but also a physical shift in that direction. So, Mr. Chairman, I would beg to move that you do now report to the that head, right, in moving that the head stand part, head 87, do now stand part.
Question.
Yeah.
The question is that head 87 now stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say no.
I beg to move, Mr. Chairman, that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one resolution in committee.
Question is that I now report to Mr. Speaker that
The passing of one resolution.
there has been the passing of one resolution. All honourable members in favour say aye. All honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one resolution in the Standing Finance Committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a first time.
The question is that this resolution be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a second time.
The question is that the resolution be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be now agreed to.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be agreed to. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 3 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 3 p.m.